Moving on, let's talk about some of the unified security solutions. Well, previously, we had something known as Defender XDR. Okay. Now it has been transitioned to Microsoft 365 Defender, which we typically obtain as a part of our M365 E5 subscription. If you do not have this E5 subscription, then you can add the E5 security add-ons. If you have got E3, for instance, you can add the add-on. Now the question is, what do we get if we invest in this one, Defender 365, Microsoft 365 Defender? Well, the main components of Microsoft 365 Defender are, number one, MDE. So if we expand it, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Endpoint represents devices, not only computers. It can be a mobile device, it can be firewall appliances, it can be other security appliances. MDO stands for Microsoft Defender for Office 365 apps, SharePoint, Teams, Yammer, and so on. It also offers protection for any applications which has been registered in Entra ID, that is MDCA, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And finally, it offers protection at identity level, MDI. Well, I'll tell you how it works. This M365 Defender is an example of EDR, which stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. It can detect endpoints. And once it has detected the endpoints, it can detect threats and it can perform remediation. It's very cool if you have not used Defender for Endpoint. Generally, what we do is we run some sort of an onboarding script, not manually, one by one, using tools like ESDs, enterprise software deployment tools like System Center Configuration Manager, Intune, or by running, let's say, logon scripts. We run the onboarding PowerShell script and the endpoint gets onboarded. Once this endpoint gets onboarded, all we need to do is we need to set a remediation level. Okay. Like, what level of remediation do you want? Full remediation, semi-remediation, which is also termed as the approval-based remediation, and no remediation. The full remediation is so cool. As and when threat gets detected at an endpoint level, it will automatically take the action. If the device needs to be isolated, it's going to do this. If the device needs to go through an on-demand scan to mitigate the risk, it's going to do it. But we don't get to decide what kind of remediation this Defender for Endpoint will take. It does auto remediation. If you're not, if you don't want, like for instance, full remediation, automatic remediation, you can go for an approval-based remediation. As and when threat gets detected, it might tell you that this particular file needs to be removed from the system, but it will seek approval. Only if you approve, then only it will take an action. The next aspect of this Microsoft 365 Defender is Defender for Cloud Apps. It offers protection at an Office 365 app level. If a malicious attachment gets detected, it will remove the attachment, just an example. If, let's say, you're constantly receiving email from a specific domain or a specific URL, it can block those URLs, it can block those domains. So it also takes auto remediation. It also applies auto remediation. Defender for Identity, which is also part of M365 Defender, offers protection at an identity level. Okay. The one thing I would like to mention over here, probably you all have heard about an Azure native security feature known as Azure Identity Protection. So when we run the full 4-day proper security courses, at some stage, most of the students will ask a typical question. What's the difference between this Entra ID protection and MDI? We understand as long as we have got the Entra ID Premium 2 subscription, which you all will have, we will get this native security solution, Entra ID protection. So why do we invest in MDI? Well, you don't invest in MDI. You get MDI as a part of M365 Defender. As a part of M365 Defender, we get this Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office, Defender for Cloud Apps, and MDI. So what's the difference between Defender for Identity and Azure Identity Protection? Well, Azure Identity Protection or Entra ID Identity Protection, okay, it's nothing but two policies and two reports: user risk policy and the sign-in risk policy. If it detects any kind of users at risk, we can take an action, block the user, grant access, provided the user goes through MFA. And as and when the risky users gets detected, we get to see the report. Oh, right, such and such user has been detected as a risky user, users at risk. Too many times you have typed in a wrong password, irregular, like for instance, password attempts, invalid password attempts multiple times, logging during the abnormal hours. It can also detect sign-in risks. I mean, 5 minutes back, you have signed in to your Office 365 portal from Australia, and then now within 10 minutes span, you're trying to access from a different geography altogether. So it's a sign-in risk. It can detect, and intra ID protection can detect risky sign-in attempts, risky users, and it will generate the report. Well, it can offer some sort of remediation. I mean, if a particular sign-in attempt has occurred from a specific IP, block the IP. If a particular user has typed in wrong password multiple times, block the user. But it lacks sophisticated orchestration process, which Sentinel offers. On the other hand, this Defender for Identity offers the same thing. It protects the identities. It checks the identities at risk and it offers them the protection. But one of the biggest difference between Defender for Identity and Intra ID protection is this Intra ID protection, which is an Intra ID Premium 2 feature, will only offer protection as long as you are consuming cloud services. If you decide to go to your workplace office on-prem, let's say I've decided, okay, I'll just open my laptop. I've got the administrative privileges. So I'll run a command like DNS-CMD and try to transfer the DNS zones so that I can send it to someone. Well, Entra ID protection, which is the Azure native protection, will not bother because it has been designed to offer protection for the cloud resources. But Defender for Identity offers a proper end-to-end protection. It will offer protections for the identities when they're trying to consume an on-premises asset. At the same time, it will also offer protection if the identities are trying to access the cloud level resources. Um, and this Defender, Microsoft 365 Defender is so cool. I'll give you the workflow, how exactly it works. Let's say there is an endpoint which has been onboarded, a device has been onboarded. And let's say a credential theft tool like PWCrack or Mimikatz has been detected. So it will immediately generate an alert like such and such suspicious apps has been encountered on endpoint one, or let's say machine one. It's not going to stop there. It's going to do a scan across all the devices which has been onboarded, and it will try to look for similar alerts. Not the same alert, similar alert, because different types of files like credential theft files will have a same kind of a signature. So it does those kinds of thumbprint hashing in order to detect such files. If it finds there are multiple endpoints having similar kind of a signature, it will combine all those individual alerts into something known as incidents. Immediately, the investigation starts on those incidents, which leads to remediation. While performing this task, it will check other things as well. Not only the endpoint will be going through a process of vulnerability assessment or management, it's going to also check, like, do I have any compromised apps within the endpoints? These days, we have got different ways of accessing Office 365 apps, right? We can access them from an app installed on our devices. Think about Teams. We can access Teams from Teams web. We can access Teams from the Teams app. Same is applicable for the Outlook. We have got Outlook installed on our machine. So these are all Office 365 apps. It's going to check for things like, are those applications okay? Did those applications get compromised? So it does this. But the thing is, now we do not need a separate solutions for managing endpoints, for detecting threats at an endpoint level. We do not need a separate solution for detecting vulnerabilities at an app level, vulnerabilities at an identity level. All has been integrated. And now we have got Copilot for security, which is integrated with Microsoft 365 Defender. It's really cool. Okay. Uh, there are plenty Microsoft courses available where we cover these kind of things like Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365 apps, Defender for identities, and so on. When I started my discussion on Defender, M365 Defender, I used the term EDR, right, which stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. It can detect the endpoints and then it can respond to the events. This Microsoft 365 Defender is an example of TVA and TVM. What does that mean? TVA represents threat and vulnerability assessment. It can detect vulnerabilities, and it also offers a capability known as TVM, threat and vulnerability management. It can manage the vulnerabilities, which is sort of remediating the vulnerabilities.